I am not an expert in your space. I am, however, and we are at our firm, learning the business. And we are evaluating the business. And we believe, hypothesis, that this is a good time to invest in the space. But most of the trends and currents around our industry are unfavorable to healthcare investing, life science investing in particular. And as we go and talk to our limited partners, if we use the word, and I apologize to anyone who might be from the FDA here, but if we use the FDA and FDA risk, it's a problem. And we pack our bag and move on to the next potential limited partner. Now, that's not an exaggeration to a large degree. So we are fighting uphill on the battle. However, the characteristic structural aspects of this business lead us to believe there's very big returns potential. And I say big returns, we think 10, 20 time return potential. So we're favorable in terms of evaluating it. We would study the market perhaps for 6 to 9 months and then select a candidate partner, meaning an investment group that we might want to work with, which we would typically work with from anywhere from 3 to 10 years. And I can take you through a little more about that. Are there any venture people in the room? Probably not. One, okay. 1.5. Academic environment? Entrepreneurs? Okay, a lot of entrepreneurs. I'm missing somebody. Who am I missing? Regulatory. Oops. Okay. Nonprofits, of course, very, very important, obviously, to this. Something I've learned an awful lot about recently. So let me just 2 seconds of background. I'm going to try to run through this as fast as I can. We are a fund, $750 million in management, 7 or 8 funds. Been in the business 27, 28 years. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've had some good successes. Parexel, you may or may not know that company. That was a company in the clinical trial space. We started with 5 people. There are 15,000 people there now in 64 different countries with tremendous growth in Asia, fully integrated clinical trials company. That was a company, when we first funded it, that had many of the characteristics in the industry as well as the company, as it appears that this industry does have also. That company got turned down by more than 100 potential sources of capital. It was felt it was too early, that pharmaceutical companies would never outsource their data, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. One thing I have learned in my career is not to necessarily pay attention to what other investors and other people say you can't do, but find a way to be committed to a space, and we were. It's been a wonderful story. Ilex Oncology, not so dissimilar. We did Campath, got it approved, but got it approved in a very, very different environment. The CEO of Ilex Oncology I was with this morning, as a matter of fact, at a board meeting. We brought him onto a board, Dick Love. Dick Love said to me this morning, we would never get Campath approved in today's environment. That's true. An important drug. Genzyme, of course, bought Ilex Oncology. Wonderful story. Arthrosurf is in the orthopedic space for minimally invasive joint repair, not regenerative medicine, but a spin-off from that. We've done Histogenics, has not been formally announced, but just raised $50 million for cartilage work. Quite an exciting story. Medaptis in the EMR space, where we're working with data. And I actually happen to believe, again, a hypothesis, that the data around this business is an opportunity. I don't know quite what it is yet, but the data needs are significant from all the major players and constituents. And then finally, CardioMEMS, which has been agreed to be acquired by St. Jude. That is an implantable sensor for congestive heart failure, again, not only for treating the patient, but also treating lots of data and for hopefully preventing readmission. So that's sort of some of the things we've recently been doing over the years here. Unfortunately, I became very familiar with the space here because of a family member in the Leukemia Lymphoma Society I joined, but a family member had leukemia. And it's a hell of a disease. So I'm very committed to working in the space and trying to help the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, 1, raise capital, 2, find entrepreneurs to back, which they do. It's about a $300 million organization. We put about $100 million a year to researchers and new companies. I do believe the nonprofits are wonderful opportunities for advancing not only funding, but the science. I spend time with Tufts University, Dartmouth College, et cetera, et cetera. That's a little bit of my background. Since there aren't many venture people in the industry, I thought I'd hear from the industry in the room, I'd like to take a little bit of the black box away from it, of what we do and who we are. There are effectively 7 things we do. We go raise money, which typically now takes a year or 2 or longer. Those funds typically are anywhere from 20 to perhaps 250 to 300 million in size. They are typically institutional investors, they are pension funds, and sometimes foundations. We then, on an ongoing basis, evaluate many segments. And so we will study and evaluate segments for, as I said, could be 6 months, could be a year, could be much longer. In this segment, we have found somewhere around 300 or so, quote, targets, opportunities. That means it's a very rich environment to build something, particularly perhaps in a roll-up and or augmenting into multiple segments of the space. We generate the deal flow. We meet people, find opportunities, and particularly it's not necessarily only the segment, but it is the management teams. And very much like the CRO industry, this industry is evolving in its management team development. And to the extent that we can support that and bring our capacities to those management teams as active investors, we think we have a better shot of having success. Pick candidates, negotiate, and nurture. One of the other structural issues that are affecting all industries right now, it's quite a problem, is the liquidity market and how to achieve an exit. The average holding period when I started in the business was 4 years for an investment. The average holding period today is somewhere north of 9 years. The IPO market has dried up substantially. The corporate participants are relatively slow to make their moves in some of the acquisitions. And without an IPO market, it makes it very difficult to have a competitive pricing and induce action on the part of the corporate participant. All right, so that's a little bit of what's going on and what we do. This chart simply is highlighting the fact that those curves here show, this is the life science funding and total funding. You can see on a percentage basis, this is percentage change year to year, it's falling dramatically, all right? So it puts it a little harder, but that may be, in fact, not a bad time to start investing because there's less capital going into the space. So we won't be competing for transactions. Same thing is true in the medical and devices trends in financing. By the way, one of the things that came out of the Affordable Care Act are more taxes. 2.3% tax on revenue level for medical devices. Stunning. A 2.3% tax at the revenue level for a medical device is 50, 60, 70% or more tax on profits. So it is moving capital away from the space relatively quickly. That wasn't a political statement, by the way. It was an investor's statement. If you want to raise money in the life science area, it's pretty clear. San Francisco, Boston, San Diego, those are the places you need to go visit and say hello. And it's growing, by the way. This differential with California to here is increasing and has been increasing over the last few years. So there are some good things. The demographics are fabulous for healthcare investing. The IT space is wonderful. The big data terminology is happening. Obviously, the companies that have data and software systems are of great interest to all of the major players in the information technology space. Transparency information is finally happening. The EMR is breaking open. Obviously, innovation, healthcare reform, while it's problematic, there are niches within it would lead to a good opportunity for us to invest in. And then, of course, we are seeing a lot of conversations, not as much action, but a lot of conversations from the Fortune 500. I won't spend more than a couple of seconds. By the way, I assume these slides are available online for people. So a little bit of our background, you can see it quickly, lots of funds. I will highlight the bottom point, however, and I'll do a couple of commentary. We do have a strategic relationship with Parexel in the clinical trial space. They are a partner and investor on our board. IBM, as well as a partner and an investor, they are very interested in emerging technologies at the smallest level of companies. To my surprise, they know very, very small companies and have been very helpful looking for new opportunities, and a number of other relationships that we have pulled together as strategic partners. Process is top down, bottom up as well. Database probably of about 10,000 companies. We collect data on everything we possibly can, even if it's not fully complete. We identify the companies and then augment through lots of M&A. We have done somewhere around 250 acquisitions of companies around what we call our core platform. I believe this space is ripe for that area, and that's favorable. It shouldn't create a concern necessarily, but it will create some critical mass, and it will create some vertical integration of activities that will be very good. So those 300 companies I talked to you about are good opportunities to bring some real premier skill set, and I think the industry needs a couple of few real top-notch quality leaders to help the rest of the industry develop. I said Cleveland Clinic, Parexel. I didn't mention Cleveland Clinic, but they're a partner also, by the way. So Cleveland Clinic, Parexel, Tufts, IBM, all coming together, leading to support for the portfolio companies. Some of the deals we've done, that's on the website. So we do look for pretty high return targets. The loss ratio on industry is relatively high. If you're going to have a 30 or 35% loss ratio, you've got to have some 10x winners. I will show you this, highlight one point here again quickly. This is a holding period for our portfolio. These are our actual companies. The circle size is just identifying the company. The yellow are active investments. The green are realized. You have two lines that go up here. The blue, which is when the IPO market was active, and a higher percentage of exits, liquidation events. And the dotted line in orange, which is now continuing to move out to the right, is what the average non-linear value curve we see is. And when we call non-linear value curve, we are suggesting at what point in the investment period are we really gaining substantial return. And what we would love to do, of course, is have deals up here, and would rather not have lots of deals way out here, all right? But this line is sliding to the right, and it means that you need to make sure that you're in the company during that year 5, 6, and 7 when the curves take off. To augment that problem and risk, aside from what might be an FDA risk, a technology risk, an implementation and management risk, we have said, and I continue to believe, that syndicate risk is the #1 risk of our business. The people that you co-invest with, who are very capable partners in your investing, have different agenda, different time frame, different pressures from their investor group. So when a company has gone above the line here and looks like you might make a little money, and you're in year 5 or 6, and you know you've got to go back and raise more money, you need to show liquidity to your limited partners so they will recycle that money back to you. But in fact, that's the opposite of what you should do. What you should do is syndicate partners who in fact understand and are working with you and will drive up that curve and get the return up dramatically by holding. Does that make sense? All right, and that's a huge topic for our industry because patience in building these companies is essential. All right, I think I'm, real quick, we're looking for growth opportunities. Revenue stage companies, we don't do startups anymore. When I was 28, I would do a startup. I can't do it now, I'm too old. We do international acquisitions. We've done 50 acquisitions offshore to adding into our core companies. We do want, if not EBITDA path, positive, a clear path to EBITDA within a year and a half, typically. We like technology, we like software, we like systems that go on top of a service business. And then we do like management spin-outs. We're seeing more and more opportunities from larger corporations for spin-outs. Management team. The #1 criteria for us really is, do they really want to partner? We are not passive. Most of the people in our industry are not passive. We want to be on the boards. We want to be strategic in our value added. We want to make a difference at the revenue level, not only being just advisors. We do like to see serial entrepreneurs. There actually aren't that many serial entrepreneurs out there. So we want to grow the next serial entrepreneur because once we have success with that entrepreneur, we want to do it again with them. Domain knowledge is essential. If you're asking questions in a session and 3 or 4 of those questions, you have to turn to your book and look it up, and or have to turn to your consultant or investment banker, you're probably not in the right room. Competitive knowledge essential, but remember, when you're sitting with a venture person, they are studying the industry and they are listening to everything you say about your competitor, because they will follow up, if they're doing primary research, with your competitor. So you do need to have confidentiality and feel comfortable in the confidentiality there. I think the rest of this functional expertise. Select the A management team in front of the A market opportunity. This has been a discussion for 20+ years while I've been in the business. There are some who would say, I want the IP, I want the technology first, and I will go find the management team. We actually want to find the management team first and then have that management team move with us collectively as we need to move them around market segments and augment the team appropriately. You've done a lot of the slides this morning, so I'm not going to have to repeat it. Market's big, it's growing fast. Something is odd about why the returns haven't been there, and I haven't figured it out yet. Because the dynamics of the industry lead me to believe there should be some better returns. You know this data, obviously. You obviously know the data where it's being applied. Lots of multiple segments that there are opportunity to pursue. This just happens to be some of the data the LLS works with and looking at the foundations. And in fact, blood cancer, cancer as a whole, myeloma, are all gaining share relatively significantly. So if you do temporal displacement 5 to 8 to 9 years from now, if this continues, obviously those bubbles will slide to the left. And by the way, that's relative market share. So the biggest on the left versus the smallest to the right, and circle size proportional. In this case, the key is 12 million patients. All right, so large, favorable market, platform candidates to put together and consolidate, some scientific relevance advancing, and some demonstrated M&A activity in some of the product areas in particular. I don't think there's IPO possibility yet, but I think by the time the companies are of scale, 5 to 7 years from now, I think there will be. This, for example, happens to be a sector we pulled together a little bit on the business. By the way, we stopped putting bubbles on. There's just so many little niches here. It's very interesting to see how many types of niches there are. The circle here is 30 million in 2011, sort of revenue, if you will, for the space. The majors are out there. What we like to find is tiers of competitors that are competing against each other because they are your exit. And if you have 3 buyers, you might get a deal done. If you have 1 buyer, you won't get the deal done. We like to find a middle tier that's fighting to become one of these players, and we search up here. So we spend lots of time trying to find these little companies up here that then will slide over because they're gaining share and potentially be acquired. All right? You know some of the companies. We looked at many of these companies over history. We actually didn't pursue them because we didn't think the market was ready, and or, for example, they might have had too much cash and really had a difficult time getting liquidity for us as a late investor. You can see how many investors ended up in Viacel, okay? Essex Woodlands, we know. We've done deals with a lot of these people, so some of the syndicate risk we can moderate because we worked with them before. That's about all I have. I hope that was helpful and get rid of a little bit of the venture black box.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you. We have time for a couple of questions. So is anybody? I confuse everybody. Okay.
Hi. Hi. What methods do you use to value companies? Is it just a multiple of EBITDA, or do you have other methods?
I have continually felt that valuation is an art, not a science. And the time when you're doing an exit is the time you want to do the valuation. But you value it based upon a number of traditional criteria. You'll obviously value it based upon a DCF model long out. But we really don't use discounted cash flow models to make a purchase decision. The value of the company will typically be very market driven. So what's happening in the marketplace right now, particularly in the HIT space, healthcare information technology space, is the Facebook effect. And there is no question the social media is crowding out opportunities in healthcare and affecting valuations. So we've been sitting out valuations for a while, and they will drop down. But a management team and a complete management team. It's really hard to do this alone. So team, team, team. So an A management team is clearly going to be in the first level. 2, margins. How big can the business be? And it is rare that we will take a management team's own business plan and value it off that. In my years, most of my business plans we cut by 50% or so on the revenue level, a little less so on the earnings level to do evaluation. But deals typically, in our sense, go into the 1 to 3 million value startup, 3 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 20, and then 50 and up. So there's about 5 buckets of deals. And it literally is not much different than buying a house. You have 3 bedrooms, 2-car garage, 5 bathrooms. Where is it located? All right. Now, we do not do a primary investment first deal in a space in California. We really believe you need a close relationship with your investor. So, we do value at the end of the day, but you can invert it and figure it out from what I said. I'll give you the answer here. We need to get 25% or more as an IRR. If you get 25% or more as an internal rate of return on the investment, all right, through typically 3 to 4 rounds of financing, through typically 5 years or so, it means your early valuation is going to be relatively low. 1-time sales, typical software business, 2-time sales, you can do relatively simple multiples. But what is really, really important as you take new capital is how capital efficient are you? Because it's the amount of capital that goes in that hurts you almost more than your first round valuation. You always get a chance to fix the valuation if you did it wrong the first time. Managements, however, sometimes don't. So I understand the difference, and therefore you really want a partner who's going to understand that and work with you to modify that if they've made a mistake. Because you don't know what the valuation ought to be until after you sold it. Does that make sense? Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. I have a quick question for you, last one. Just advice to the group, because I know from conversations with a lot of folks in the room, you guys have not interacted as much with the venture community as some other sectors in life care. What advice would you give to entrepreneurs building a cord blood related business if they're looking for venture financing?
Well, the first thing is domain knowledge. Turn those things around and apply what I said as criteria to the investor. All right? And if you did as much homework on the investors that you potentially would target as you do in your own business plan, it would pay off a lot. I will tell you that if I consider, and this is not gratuitous, if I consider doing an investment in this space, I'm going to find the 5 people in this space in my business who know the space, and I know that you're one of them. And I'm going to do what I can to pull that group together. So as you go, do your homework on the groups, because we are all totally different. If anything is in pharmaceutical services and outsourcing, such as clinical trials, I want to see it. I want to see it anywhere across the country. I want to see that deal. But if you send me a deal that happens to be in a, let's say, environmental space, it's not who we are. I'm still getting startup drug molecules. We haven't done drug molecules for 10 years. So I would say do homework on your partners. And I would recognize it's a marriage. If you do it right, it's a marriage, I think, personally.
Okay. All right.
So last point. If someone says you can't do it, don't listen.
Yeah.
You can do it.
All right. All right, Dana, thanks.